Hi, welcome back to the second part of reading an XML or RSS feed. We're going to take a look in this tutorial at just expanding on what we did in the first part, which was reading our PHP.NET feed here. We use simple XML to take this XML feed, interpret it in a way that we could easily loop through and take data from it. Now what we're going to do in this part is we're just going to turn what we've done into a function. It's going to be semi-useless because we're only going to be doing what we are here. We're not going to specify which feed we want to read from. However, it does make it a lot easier to reuse if required. So let's go ahead and make a start. I've created a file called function.php, so everything's going to go into here, and we're going to be working on refreshing this in the browser, so we're going to refresh that as we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and create our PHP tags, and we'll define our function. I'm just going to call it php_net_feed. Now, we want to be able to pass one parameter to this function, and that is the limit. So I'm passing a limit to this, and that's going to be essentially the same thing, well, exactly the same thing as we did here. We're going to define a limit, except we're not going to be doing it as verbosely as we're doing here. Now this part here hasn't changed or won't change, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this. In fact, not a lot of it's going to change, but we are going to need to do something a little differently. And we're not going to, the function itself isn't going to be echoing the data out. It's going to be returning it as another array, so we can then use that elsewhere and use the array however we want. So it's going to be a lot, cleaner to use this. Anyway, let's go on. Okay, so we've already got our limit, which is passed through to the function. We first of all need to, we don't need to do it first, but we need to define our output. So I'm going to define that as an array. So we're going to be returning an array as well. And I'm also going to define x here, which is equal to 1, and that's going to be our counter as it is here. Now this part hasn't changed either. It will change in here slightly, so let's go ahead and copy this code and paste it in. And let's just align that up properly. Okay, so we are passing in a limit. It's going to define x, or create a variable called x, assign 1 to it. We're getting the feed. We've got this output variable which we're going to be working on here in a minute, and we're looping through as we've already seen. So nothing, massively new. When we refresh, nothing's going to happen, but we need to go ahead and call this function. So I'm going to say PHP net feed, and I'm going to say limit. I'm actually going to say feed equals. Now, what we're doing here is we're not just going to, echo this out line by line. What we're actually doing, we've got an undefined variable. Let's go ahead and correct that. So we've got limit. That's because we have not passed an actual limit through. I've just typed in limit. Let's go for, we'll go for 5 for now. Okay, so when I refresh, that should clear. Yep, that's fine. Okay, so back to what I was saying. We're not going to be echoing the data out here. It's going to be pointless. We don't want to be echoing data from a function. We want to return the data in an array that we can use however we want. When we echo things from a function, we're very limited in what we can do with that data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an array within this array, so an associative array. So for every loop of this, we're adding to this array. This essentially means, put something else in it. For example, if it was Alex, this would end up with 5 Alexes within this output. I can show you that if you want. Print our feed. Refresh. What's gone wrong? We're not returning it, so let's go down here and return output. So we're returning the output once we've added Alex to it 5 times, because 5 is our limit. Print R. Okay, let's refresh. Okay, so we've got 5 Alexes. What we actually want is we want 5 arrays. And the reason we want 5 arrays is because we're going to have, first of all, the title, and that's going to equal the title up here. And then we're going to have the URL, and that's going to not equal but contain, so it's not really, we're not really saying equal to or equals, that's going to contain the URL. Okay, so now when we go ahead and we print, We've got, a bit of a mess here, but let's go ahead and do our trick that we saw in the first part of the tutorial. We're going to echo with pre-tags around it. And then we're going to pass that optional true parameter. Okay, so now what we've got is we've got an array with the title here, and we've got the URL here, title here, and the URL here. So now what we can do is we can actually take this feed here, and although in one file it seems quite far-fetched to be doing it like this in a unnecessary amount of code, what we're actually doing is, for example, if this function was contained in an external file, so a function file as it should be, what we're actually doing is we are creating a much more flexible version of this. If we wanted to use this, say, a couple of times, once on one page and have 10 results, and once on another page and maybe have 5 results, or we wanted to give our users, say, an option to limit results, we're using a PHP.NET newsfeed, but this could be a Twitter feed, it could be a Facebook, some kind of Facebook feed, it could be absolutely anything. So what we can do now is we can say for each, and what I need you to do is imagine that this is in a completely different file. We can say for each feed, so remember we're working on our feed here now. For each feed as item, we could then say echo item title, and then we could go ahead and concatenate a comma onto it, for example. So when I refresh now, you see that for every loop we're getting this title given out to us, but as we did it before, we did it in an unordered list, so we can go and do that by all means. We can go just create our UL up there and then end our UL down there, indent this, and we could go ahead and we could echo out li, and we could do the same at the end there. We'll just close that tag, and when we refresh we get a list of our results, and that means that we've got a lot more control over all of our data rather than just echoing it out. We can go ahead and then change this, and we can go ahead and refresh, and that will just pull that data out. So we can manipulate the data within this output as well. So that's essentially how we would turn what we did in the first part of the tutorial into a function, and hopefully a bit about why it could be useful, why it should be done this way, and why it's a lot more useful, and hopefully that was understood. So that's how to read XML or RSS feeds with PHP.